lecture of our Fall 2021 series. Whether you're here with us watching virtually from home, you will be able to ask questions at the end of the program. Our virtual audience will use the chat feature in YouTube to post comments and questions. We ask all audience members with us tonight to please take the opportunity to silence your cell phones. This evening, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Roy Heidicker, or Doc, as many of you know him. His lecture, The Battle of Cannae, is one in a series that will discuss great battles in history. We'll let you know about when all of those other lectures are scheduled. Dr. Heidicker became the 4th Fighter Wing historian in June 2005 and returned 2 years ago. He was retired 2 years ago. He was responsible for writing the periodic histories and delivering historical information as needed to the wing and community. During his career there, he and the 4th Fighter Wing Public Affairs Office created a feature-length documentary film, The History of the 4th Fighter Wing. He continues to work with his wife, Judine, in their internet-based company, Classic Aviation and War Art. It is one of the largest aviation art dealerships in the world with worldwide sales. To highlight military history, Doc founded the North Carolina Military History Roundtable in September 2008. The organization meets periodically to hear a lecture about a battle, campaign, or some aspect of military history. In association with the foundation of Wayne Community College, Doc organized a 4-year series of lectures celebrating the 150th anniversary of great Civil War battles, and he returned to present lectures to commemorate the 75th anniversary of World War II. Doc was born in New York, attended West Point for 2 years, and completed his undergraduate degree at Marquette University. He was an officer in the Marine Corps through the Naval ROTC. After his military service, much of his career was at the University of Southern California in various roles. While there, he obtained a master's degree and PhD in military history. Let's give Doc a warm welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you being here this evening. One of the things I found out when you have a screen this large is some of the images that look fine on the computer, when you blow them up this big, they're a little fuzzy. So bear with me on that. When I did the lecture series on the Civil War and World War II, those are the two periods that I really focus on. I always knew something about the subject before I started doing my research. Tonight, not so much, which makes this very interesting for me. You know, I knew a little bit about Hannibal, I knew just the basics about Cannae, but to actually dive in and find out who was Hannibal and what was this battle really all about, I found fascinating, so I hope you enjoy learning about it as much as I did in order to make the presentation. Battle of Cannae, 2016 BC. Well, I have to lead up to it, and the Battle of Cannae was the Second Punic War. The First Punic War, the main general was Hamilcar Barca, who was Hannibal's father. Great man, great leader. Another image of him. Now, this kind of shows you, this is Carthage, this is Rome. Part of the reason why these two empires went to war, the gray is Carthage and her possessions and interests, and of course Rome is the city and the Italian states that are aligned with Rome. Carthage was very rich. Now, back in those days, very rich meant you could hire mercenary armies, which is part of the reason why Carthage was so strong. So why did they go to war? Two big empires trying to control the Mediterranean. Now, This was the largest naval battle, the Battle of Cannae, 241 BC, which the Romans won decisively. Because of that victory, Carthage loses the First Punic War. Now, Hamilcar didn't lose the war, so he always had this sense of, we'll get him next time. Kind of like Germany after World War I. So there's this sense in Carthage and the Barca family that, well, we didn't really lose that, maybe we'll get another shot. Now, this is a very famous event that took place, Hannibal's blood oath. Hannibal Barca was preparing his expedition to Iberia. 9-year-old Hannibal wanted to be allowed to accompany him. Hamilcar asked his son to put his hand on the sacrificial animal offered on the altar to Baal and made him swear an oath. That oath was that Hannibal would forever be an enemy to Rome. Hannibal kept his oath, becoming Rome's greatest adversary in her long and turbulent history. Image of Hannibal. In order to get the jump on Rome, because the theaters of operation are Italy, Spain, Sicily, North Africa, Hannibal takes his army and crosses the Alps in 218 BC. One of the greatest marches in all of military history. Starts off with 50,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants. Very treacherous march. And when they arrive, it's got about 20,000 soldiers and far fewer elephants left. Now, let's talk about the Roman army, who Hannibal is going to be up against. This is the main weapon of the Roman army, the gladius, the Roman sword. You can kill them by swiping, you can kill them by stabbing. Excellent, excellent weapon. The Roman shield, huge. We'll see other images to show you the size of the shield. And inside it had a strap to help the soldier use it. Roman soldier in battle, armed with the sword and the shield, Roman soldier was a deadly fighter. Gladius was a lethal and efficient sword. Like I said, you could kill by thrusting or by swiping. The shield was large and heavy enough to be not only used defensively, but offensively to knock people down. Used with other shields, it was very effective against spears and arrows and things like that. This is one of those fuzzy pictures I told you about. Roman soldiers on the march. Roman soldiers deploying for battle. You can imagine working together how you could use those shields to prevent the enemy from getting at you, but also using them offensively. Now, what's the purpose of the Roman legion? This is quoted from the book Legionary, the Roman Soldier's Unofficial Manual. For every legionary on active service, this is what it comes down to. Eventually, after months or years of training, the moment has arrived to do what the legion does best: face the enemy in the open field and chop them into meat cubes. Romans are very good at this. This is sort of the early stages of the Roman Empire, but of course they're around for 500-600 years ruling the Mediterranean. Now let's talk about Hannibal's forces. Hannibal's forces are made up of a variety of people from different parts of the Mediterranean world. The Numidians, nomadic tribesmen from modern Algeria, superb cavalry mounted or dismounted, also tough and disciplined infantry. Iberians, excellent cavalry and infantry. Spanish cavalry, they had the best horses. Their heavy cavalry, sorry about the spelling, was swift and skilled and superior to the Romans. The Balearic slingers, I didn't know anything about these folks. From the Balearic Islands, think David and Goliath, where you have the leather pouch with a rope. And they were really good at this. They could target an individual with a piece of lead or a stone up to 900 feet away. This could also penetrate armor and helmets. So this is an outstanding group of folks to have on the battlefield. Libyan mercenaries served as excellent heavy infantry or skirmishers. Skirmishers are the slingers, and they're kind of light infantry. When the battle begins, they're in front of the infantry, and they're going long range against the other army. So they're hurling slings or they're throwing spears. But as we'll see, after they've done their job, they retreat behind the infantry, and that's essential for some of what's going to be coming up. More on Hannibal's forces. The Celts, also known to the Romans as the Gauls, these are soldiers from southern Germany. Now, they were already there when Hannibal's forces get to the other end of the Alps, and he was lucky they were, because they were already at war here and there with the Romans, and they were happy to join him, and even happier after he started winning victories. They had huge swords, and they inspired fear in the Romans. The Romans had not done well against them previously. Carthaginians, few in numbers, but they provided the long-term professional leadership. Again, a lot of Carthage's forces were mercenaries because they had the wealth to hire soldiers. Elephants. Most Romans had never seen these animals before, so that's a scary proposition. Think Lord of the Rings, huge elephants, not that big, but still they probably appeared that big. As far as the Roman cavalry was concerned, it wasn't just the size of the elephant that was scary, it was the smell, because horses had never smelled elephants before, and that scared the daylights out of them. The bad thing about elephants, if they're wounded or they get scared in the heat of the battle and they stampede, they kill both sides. So elephants are good most of the time, but other times, not so much. Roman equipment, well, after Trebia, Hannibal's forces put the captured Roman equipment to their own use. Romans have good equipment, let's use it. Hannibal as military commander. Hannibal could lead such a diverse army because of his inspired leadership. He'd been with armies since he was a boy, and he shared the hardships. He would sleep on the ground, eat the same food. Soldiers like that when their commanders are right there with them. His great leadership inspired great soldiers. He fought alongside his soldiers, often at the key and most dangerous part of the battlefield. Again, we'll see that, especially at Cannae. Victory inspires confidence, and Hannibal led his army to multiple victories over the Romans. He uses terrain, the weather, knowledge of his enemy, and surprise to confound the Romans again and again. Battle of Trebia River. This is the first major battle, this is in 218 BC, that the Carthaginians fight under Hannibal against the Romans. The Roman consul Publius Cornelius Scipio withdrew his forces to the Trebia River. After reinforcing Scipio's army, Consul Tiberius Longus wanted to engage Hannibal, thinking he could win glory against the Carthaginian general. Again, Hannibal is kind of an unknown quantity at this point. Hannibal correctly gauged the rash character of Longus, surmising that he likely could be provoked into battle at a time and place of Hannibal's choosing. Again, Hannibal has a good sense of the enemy and uses that effectively. Hannibal's forces were outnumbered by a third. Hannibal had about 30,000 in his army, Carthaginians and allies, against about 42,000 Romans. Again, Hannibal knew Longus was a political appointee without much military experience. He further understood that Roman consuls alternated leadership every other day. Although Scipio, a veteran officer, advocated delaying engagement until winter had passed, Hannibal knew that he needed only wait until Longus had assumed command to provoke confrontation. I mean, think about that. If you got a guy who doesn't want to do battle and a guy who does, you just wait until the guy who does want to do battle is in charge. He's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So you wait until he's in charge, and then you can provoke him into a battle. This is a map showing the Battle of Trebia. This is the Trebia River. Now, it's wintertime. It's not frozen enough that you can walk on it, but it's frozen enough that it is absolutely freezing. Now, before the battle, Hannibal takes his brother Mago and puts 1,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry behind some vegetation rise so that they are not seen to the Romans. So they're going to be in a position, once the battle is joined, to do some hurt behind the Roman army. We may come back to this. Hannibal drew up his army across the river, instructed his men to rest, and upon waking, to grease themselves with fat to insulate against the bitter cold, also to enjoy a good, leisurely, hot breakfast. Hannibal placed, like I said, his younger brother Mago in charge of an ambush force. He then had contingents of his Numidian cavalry go across the freezing river to taunt the Romans, mocking Longus with personal insult. Again, this is Longus's day to be in charge, so Hannibal knows this is a good idea. Longus responded as Hannibal had expected, sending out his army in full force and without breakfast. The Romans had to wade across the freezing cold Trebia, not greased up the way the Punic army was, in pursuit of the Numidians. The hardy Numidian mounts forded the cold river, little difficulty, not a problem for them, whereas the Roman infantry assembled on the far banks of the Trebia, soaked and shivering. The Romans held the clear numerical advantage, but Hannibal's warm, rested, and well-fed army was far better prepared to do battle. As the Romans advanced, Hannibal's skirmishers took a heavy toll, and many Romans fell to stones hurled by his elite Balearic slingers. Others were trampled by elephants or cut down as they attempted to fall back to the river. The Roman army fought bravely, but it was put to flight when Mago's force, who they were completely unaware of, joined the battle and engaged them from behind. Picture the elephants at the battle. They kind of look like the ones in Lord of the Rings, I think. What are the results? 15,000 Romans are killed, most of the army. Almost all the rest were taken prisoner. Carthaginians suffered approximately 5,000 casualties, so a fraction of what the Romans had suffered. This was just one of many occasions in the Second Punic War in which a canny Hannibal used nature, the environment, and knowledge of his enemy to augment the strength of his smaller army. And the Celts, the Gauls that we had talked about, they're aware that this happens, so other soldiers, good soldiers, are attracted to join Hannibal's force. Now the Romans, well, maybe this was an accident, Hannibal winning such a decisive victory. So the next year, 2017, we have the Battle of Lake Trasimene. Esteemed military historian Basil Liddell Hart calls the Battle of Lake Trasimene the greatest ambush in history. The battle was an ambush on a large scale, one of those rare instances in the annals of military history in which a whole army, not just Mago and 2,000 men, but an entire army lies in wait and then destroys almost the whole of the opposition. Setting the trap, Roman consul Caius Flaminius and his army of 25,000 were in pursuit of Hannibal's forces. Hannibal led the Romans into a narrow defile north of Lake Trasimene. The pathway was surrounded on all sides by hills or water, the perfect killing ground for an unsuspecting foe. Hannibal placed his heavy infantry in sight of the Romans, but blocking the Romans from the route out of the killing grounds. Here's one of the maps to show you exactly what happened. So you've got the big Lake Trasimene. These are hills up here. So Hannibal puts his heavy infantry in sight of the Roman army. So the Romans see, oh my gosh, there's our prey, but in this case, they're not prey, they're bait. So the Romans advance to the river, the river's to the right of them, the hills are to the left of them, and when they are completely between the river and his men, you can guess what happens next. The bulk of Hannibal's forces, including his cavalry, were hidden in the hills. At dawn, Flaminius set off after the enemy forces ahead of him that he could see. A thick mist was rising off the lake. The Romans were confident of victory, and they did no reconnaissance that morning. The Roman legions deployed for battle. Another map showing you a little more detail. So again, this is the bait, lake, hills, Hannibal's army up here. The hidden Punic army charged out of the mist downhill into the unsuspecting Romans, into the flanks and rear of the surprised Roman legions. Unable to organize any effective resistance, the Romans were killed where they stood or driven into the lake and drowned. Consul Flaminius was recognized and killed by a lone Punic cavalry warrior. So most of the army is killed, including the commanding officer. Image of the dead Romans in Lake Trasimene. Another thing you don't want to do is to be driven into a lake wearing armor. Not a good thing. Results of this battle, Romans again, 15,000 killed, almost 10,000 captured. What Flaminius saw as an easy victory was in fact the slaughter of almost his entire army and himself. Carthaginians only lost 1,500 men. When you are assaulting downhill against an unsuspecting foe, the odds are with you. This was the greatest ambush in history, one of the most one-sided battles in history. Romans have now lost Trebia and Lake Trasimene. So what are they going to do? Raise an army so large and so powerful it could not be defeated. So these are their plans moving forward. They raised an army of 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. This is 8 legions, twice the size of any army built by Rome to operate as a unit. So they're serious. We're done with this Hannibal guy. We're going to build an army that there's no way, tricks or no tricks, that he's going to defeat us. Consuls C. Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus each commanded 4 legions, but again, they alternated command every other day. The Roman army at Cannae, half of the army consisted of army veterans who had known nothing but defeat to Hannibal and his army. The other half were new recruits who received rudimentary military training. The other thing that happens at this battle is the Romans are so confident of victory that a lot of the leadership, including Roman senators, are with the army to take part in this great let's annihilate Hannibal army. Think about the first Manassas in the Civil War, in which you had U.S. Union congressmen, senators watching it because they wanted to see the one and only great battle that was going to put down the Confederacy. Sort of what happens at Cannae. Roman strategy going into the battle, in short, was pack the middle. In other words, 80,000 guys, but we're going to make the middle so strong, whatever Hannibal has, we're just going to break through it. Now at Trebia, they had briefly broken through Hannibal's center, but the battle was already lost, so it didn't really matter that much. Now they think with the additional mass of forces, the Romans are confident of success at Cannae. Hannibal's troops see this massive Roman army that they're about to confront, and one of his senior officers, Gisgo, nervously commented on the number of the enemy. Well, Hannibal turned to Gisgo with a grave look and said, "There's another thing you have not noticed, Gisgo, which is even more amazing, that in all this enormous host, there is not one among them called Gisgo." In other words, 80,000 of them, but they're not as good as we are. There's not a guy over there called Gisgo. And the senior staff laughed. The story spread to the troops in the ranks, and it gave them an extra set of confidence despite looking at this massive Roman army out there. Phase one. Oops, sorry. Hannibal, his cavalry is on both flanks. Hannibal positions himself in the center of the line, because that's where the key to the battle is going to be. His Numidians are, no, that's the second phase. I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, first phase. So this is the center. Spanish, Celts, Hannibal, here in the center. Numidians are on the flanks, but they're a little bit back. The Carthaginian cavalry start off here and here, and you can see this massive Roman army in front. Hannibal bows his infantry outward to kind of say, all right, you want to pack the middle? Here we are. Come get us. So as the Romans start to move in, the Carthaginian cavalry goes after the Roman cavalry. So this is what it looks like at the beginning of the battle. Hannibal's skirmishers hit the Roman army with stones and spears, and then they retreat behind the Punic infantry. The Roman skirmishers do the same thing, not as good, and then they retreat behind the Roman infantry. Punic line, like I said, bowed towards the Roman infantry, inviting the Romans to pursue their pack the middle tactics. The Numidian infantry was out of sight beside and behind the Punic forces in the center. Then this is phase two. So you've got the Romans are moving in. This starts to bow this way. Numidians are moving forward. The cavalry is making short work of the Roman cavalry. Hasdrubal takes care of his portion of the Roman cavalry and then comes back to help Hanno take care of what's left of the Roman cavalry. Now, normally in ancient times, when cavalry defeats cavalry, they chase them down and finish them off. So we've got the Roman cavalry on the run, but the Punic cavalry isn't chasing them. We'll see what they do instead. Hannibal, like I said, he's in the center, encouraging his infantry to slowly give ground as the Romans advanced. As the Romans advance, they're like, wow, it's working, we're winning. They lose cohesion. During this phase, the Numidian infantry moves forward to begin to flank the Romans. As this was occurring, Punic cavalry is decisively defeating the Roman cavalry. Phase 3. This has held. They've advanced so that this is like a horseshoe now. The Romans are surrounded on 3 sides. Hasdrubal and Hanno, they're not chasing the Roman cavalry. They come back to seal off the back of the Roman army. And who do they encounter at the very back? The skirmishers. So it's not like they're dealing with the Romans and their great shields and swords and everything else. They're going up against the skirmishers. They make short work of them. So the Romans are surrounded and they're being pressed on all sides. Punic infantry and Numidians now had the Romans surrounded on 3 sides. The cavalry doubles back and takes care of the last side. So Romans are completely surrounded at this point. An image of the Romans being surrounded at Cannae. Not too fuzzy. The surrounded Roman army, by surrounding the Roman army and pressing it back into itself, Hannibal took away their ability to function as legions are required to. Without the necessary room to fight and maneuver, the Romans quickly realized they were doomed. This is August, and it's hot. Without water, wearing heavy uniforms and carrying heavy shields, the Romans were physically and psychologically exhausted. Now, in addition to that, Hannibal's skirmishers, the guys who are great with the slings and the spears, are hurling spears and stones over the Punic forces and into the mass of the Romans. So in addition to being killed by the infantry and cavalry that's right in front of them, they're getting hit from above. Another view of the killing of the surrounded Romans. Putting it into perspective, approximately 60,000 Roman soldiers were killed at Cannae in one day. Some of the Roman cavalry and the soldiers guarding the Roman camps survived. All the surrounding Romans were killed. The average Roman soldier weighed 130 pounds, leaving almost 8 million pounds of human meat rotting in the August sun. Hannibal lost 6,000 soldiers, again, 1/10 of the Romans who were killed. Seeing the slaughter of the Romans. And think about this. This is essentially a huge knife fight. These are not people being killed by artillery and rifles and hand grenades. This is up close and personal that this is happening. Livy's a Roman historian. This is his description of the morning after the battle. Here and there amidst the slain, there started up a gory figure whose wounds had begun to throb with the chill of dawn, and was cut down by his enemies. Some were discovered lying there alive with thighs and tendons slashed, baring their necks and throats and bidding their conquerors drain the remnant of their blood. Other Romans had buried their heads in the dirt in order to suffocate themselves. Livy continued, but what most drew the attention of all beholders was a Numidian who was dragged out alive from under a dead Roman, but with a mutilated nose and ears. For the Roman, unable to hold a weapon in his hands, had expired in a frenzy of rage while rending the other with his teeth. Nasty stuff. Other battles, other losses. Again, put this into perspective. 3-day Battle of Gettysburg produced 53,000 casualties, but of these, it was 7,863 who were killed over the course of 3 days, considered by many the pivotal battle of the American Civil War. D-Day, the total of Allied soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen killed was 4,414. U.S. killed at Pearl Harbor, 2,403. 9/11 attacks killed 2,977, comparing that to 60,000. In the years of bitter conflict in the Vietnam War, 58,220 Americans were killed, fewer than the Romans lost at Cannae in this one single day. What's Hannibal going to do after the Battle of Cannae? After Cannae, Hannibal's cavalry commander, Hannibal, told Hannibal, "Follow me. I will go first with the cavalry, that the Romans may know that you are there before they know you are coming." In other words, I'm going to Rome. Come as soon as you can. Hannibal refused to march on Rome immediately. Hannibal stated, "So the gods haven't given everything to one man. You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but you don't know how to use one." Why didn't Hannibal march on Rome? Well, the quick and easy answer, he didn't have siege equipment, which he thought was necessary to take Rome. He also knew that in addition to the destruction of a huge army, Cannae had decimated a substantial portion of Rome's leadership. The consul Paulus, 2 proconsuls, both quaestors, and 80 senators were killed. So many equestrians, who all wore gold rings, died that their gold rings filled several baskets. Hannibal was convinced Rome would sue for peace on terms acceptable to Carthage. This is a huge statue. This is a basket with gold rings. So Hannibal is sort of grabbing at the rings. What happens in the Second Punic War after Cannae? For the next 14 years, Hannibal remains in Italy trying to achieve another Cannae-type battle against the Romans. Romans weren't going to play anymore. They would not do battle with him. In 202 BC, Hannibal is forced to return to Africa to defend Carthage from Roman armies commanded by Scipio Africanus, a survivor of Cannae and a charismatic Roman general. He is the first of the charismatic Roman generals, and again, we're going to talk about that. Hannibal and Carthage are defeated at Zama. Carthage loses the war, but Hannibal escapes. The end of Hannibal. In 183 BC, Rome decided Hannibal must be killed. It's long after the war. But Rome doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. Knowing he's about to be captured, Hannibal takes poison. He's 63 years old. Hannibal's last words reportedly were, "Let us now put an end to the great anxiety of the Romans, who have thought it too long and too hard a task to wait for the death of a hated old man." Hannibal, as they're crossing the Alps, extraordinary military leader, extraordinary accomplishments. The end of Carthage. Despite the defeat, Rome still saw Carthage as a threat. Wealthier than ever, Rome feared Carthage would hire another mercenary army. Carthage owed Rome a huge debt at the end of the Second Punic War. It was like a 30-year debt. And Carthage said, "Well, we'll write you a check, we'll pay the whole thing in full." That wasn't a good thing, because the Romans are thinking, if they're that rich, they can hire all the mercenaries in the world. 150 BC, Rome, kind of a trumped-up reason, went to war with Carthage. After a desperate struggle, Carthage fell in a sea of flames in 146 BC. The surviving population was enslaved. This was genocide on a grand scale. Carthage ceased to exist. You don't want to go to war against Rome if you're going to lose. Hannibal's revenge. It was because of Hannibal that Rome saw the rise of charismatic generals like Scipio Africanus, who served for long periods of time. Prior to this, the people in charge of the armies, they weren't even like in charge for the year, they would alternate. But Scipio Africanus, again, a very charismatic leader, served for a long time, and his army was very loyal to him. Roman legions were more loyal to these generals than to Rome. Now, Scipio never was in a position where he could threaten to take over Rome, but generals like Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar rose to power, and they ultimately turned Rome from a republic to a dictatorship. This was all begun because of the threat of Hannibal. Let's go to more modern times, talk about the impact of Cannae. This is Count Alfred von Schlieffen, the head of the German General Staff from 1891 to 1905. He viewed Cannae as the ideal of victory, and this shaped his strategy to defeat the French army in World War I. Remember, the Germans faced the French on one side, French and English, and the Russians on the other side, so he wanted to defeat the French quickly and knock them out of the war. Well, let's have a big Cannae-type battle. The Schlieffen plan fell short of the quick and total victory that it was intended to achieve, and instead, World War I descends into 4 years of brutal trench warfare that kills off a generation of young men from all these countries and leads directly to World War II. George Patton, what does he have to say about the Battle of Cannae? General George Patton was not just a great battlefield commander, he was a devoted and knowledgeable student of military history. In 1939, he wrote, "There's an old saw to the effect that to have a Cannae, you must have a Varro, a bad general. In order to win a great victory, you must have a dumb enemy commander." From what we know at the moment, the Poles qualified. The Poles had just been annihilated by the Germans, so that was his understanding of the battle. History does repeat itself. 1941, massive German armies invaded Russia in an effort to destroy Russia's power to exist. Initially, many Cannae-like battles were fought, in which huge Russian armies were encircled and destroyed. The Germans had a saying, "We are victorying ourselves to death," because every time we do this, it costs us men and equipment. And the Russians just come up with more and more and more, like the Romans did in the Punic Wars. Despite losing 28 million people killed, the Russians refused to give up the fight. Showing a German Tiger tank in Berlin, the end of the war. Russia is triumphant despite all of these Cannaes. Ultimately, Russian determination, population, generalship, and industrial output turned the tide against the German invasion. Hitler learned, like Hannibal, that multiple initial triumphs don't guarantee victory against a foe, willing to sustain losses and unwilling to capitulate. Hannibal's invasion of Italy and early triumphs led to the destruction of Carthage. Hitler's invasion of Russia and early triumphs led to the destruction of Germany. Russians triumphant over Berlin. So what is the lesson of Cannae? Massive and humiliating defeats on the battlefield hurt but never broke Roman morale. Time and population was always on Rome's side. After Cannae, Rome refused to give Hannibal the opportunity for another Cannae. Despite Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, Rome won the Second Punic War. During peace talks at the end of the Vietnam War, an American general told his North Vietnamese counterpart, "You know, we never lost a battle." And the North Vietnamese general looked at him and said, "What difference does that make?" When you look at the Second Punic War, who won all those initial massive one-sided battles? Hannibal and the Carthaginians. Who won the war? The Romans. That's the ultimate lesson of Cannae. Now open it up for questions. Gentleman over there.
Raise your hand.
Not you. Only kidding. Feel free.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I'm really ignorant about the geography here, so where did these three great battles actually take place?
Trebia is northern Italy. Trasimene is coming down towards the center of Italy, and Cannae is further south. So Hannibal is working his way south. His plan, because he's not willing, he doesn't feel he's capable of besieging and taking Rome, is he feels in the south there's Roman cities that are not happy about Rome taking command of the entire Italian peninsula. He thinks he can win them over to his side. So he's heading south during these battles.
When you were describing the Battle of the Lake, my mind went to George Armstrong Custer chasing a few Indians while the others lay in wait.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Custer gets defeated because he doesn't know what he's up against. By the time he knows, it's too late. By the time the Romans realize all these Carthaginians are hidden and they're now coming at us downhill, ball game's over, big time.
In any of your research, did you get an understanding of how Hannibal was able to use terrain against the Romans at the Battle of Cannae? Livy writes a little bit that the Romans not only had to walk into the sunlight in their face, but also the Carthaginians were kicking up dust and had the wind at their backs.
Exactly. Thank you. Like he said, at Cannae, in addition to surrounding the Roman army, Hannibal planned it in such a way that the Romans are looking into the sun. You're trying to drive someplace and the sun's straight in front of you, tough to see. But also the wind is kicking the sand and the dust into the Romans' faces. It doesn't sound like much, but when you're fighting for your life and you're having trouble seeing and breathing, not a good thing. Thank you. Sir.
What did Hannibal do with the prisoners he captured? I know that he didn't have any POW camps.
Right.
Did it?
For the most part, because the Roman army often had allied soldiers with him from different parts of Rome, he let them go because he wanted to encourage other Roman allies to come over to his side. And again, help me out on this, I don't think he did mass executions of any kind. You know, Hannibal is always looked at as this really brutal, bloodthirsty person because the Romans wrote the history, but he wasn't. In fact, the Romans killed one of his brothers and made a point of tossing his head into the Punic camp so Hannibal would know they had killed his brother. So I think for those days, he was relatively lenient with the prisoners.
Having seen the Alps, are there pathways through there that elephants can get through? It seems like that would be an insurpassable thing for an elephant to get through the Alps.
Oh, that's why they lost some. It was really tough. So it's amazing they got through with as many as they did, but they lost elephants due to trying to take them through the Alps. Absolutely.
Hannibal came from North Africa. Where did he assemble his force? And how was it in Italy, or did he have to take boats and ships to take a lot of them over to the Italian side?
Boats and ships to get them. He started off in the Iberian Peninsula, essentially what is today Spain, which was a lot of, let me go back to that map to show you, towards the beginning. So his army was in this part of the world when war was declared, so then he had to go over the Alps to wind up in northern Italy. And a big part of both the First and Second Punic War was command of the sea. The other thing that's important to understand is when Hannibal got his army here, he wasn't reinforced much over the course of the war by Carthage. He was lucky he had the Gauls, who were such good fighters and who were willing to join his army. But geography played a big part in that. And like I said, after Cannae, he hung out in Italy for 14 more years. And it was only when Scipio is in the outskirts of Carthage that he comes home and tries to defend Carthage. Sir, up here. Hold on for the microphone.
The Roman forces had the shields and the short swords. What were the armaments that the Carthaginians went up against them with?
Initially, I'm going to be honest with you, I couldn't find much specifically about that. But after Trebia, because the Romans had such good equipment, they used Roman equipment. So, you know, the Romans not only were badly beaten, but they resupplied the Carthaginian army through 3 battles in which they lost massive amounts of people. So the Carthaginians had more Roman equipment than they could possibly use.
During this time period, how far had the Roman Empire expanded?
Up until this time,
Yeah.
that's kind of it. This is the early days. And you know, once they get rid of Carthage, of course, they dominate the whole Mediterranean. They take over the Holy Lands. They're in England. They're in Germany. So these are kind of the early days. If anybody was going to put an end to Rome towards the beginning, it was going to be Hannibal. So this was defeating Carthage sort of set the stage for Rome to expand and become the great empire that they became. And like I said, this is 200 years BC, and the Pax Romana is like 400 years after Augustus, or including Augustus. So we're looking 500-600 years of Roman domination. So the fact that Hannibal almost put an end to all this is amazing, especially when you look at how few people he had at his disposal to do this with. He truly was a military genius. Anybody else? Thank you so much.
I was going to say,
appreciate you
I have
coming.
one, Doc.
Okay.
So, you know, they lost the first 2 battles, the Romans.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't they seem to learn from those mistakes? Because they were surrounded each time.
Sure.
Was it hubris? Was it the fact that the generals kept changing every year? What was that?
I think all of what you said, but when you look at things from the Roman perspective, it was like, okay, the first battle, 25,000 Romans, and we actually kind of broke their center. The second battle, well, that was tricks. That was, he led us into this crazy battlefield where we had we're between a lake and the hills, and he hid his entire army in the hills. This is insane. So the third battle, we've got 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. We're not going to follow him down a narrow path with a lake. We're just not going to do that anymore. We're not going to cross a freezing lake without breakfast or greasing ourselves up. We're not going to do any of those silly things anymore. So Cannae was a large, open battlefield. I mean, they had the sun in their eyes and they had the dust kicked up, But other than that, they thought, hey, we can't lose. This is an open battlefield. We have this huge superiority in numbers, and in their minds, they felt that they had learned from the first two defeats. And now, with this massive army and the pack the middle strategy, we can't lose. I mean, and again, think about this. Who would have thought that a much smaller army could come up with tactics to not only defeat a much larger army, but to completely encircle that larger army and kill every single person that's encircled? 60,000 soldiers in one day. It was unprecedented. So what I would say is, when you look at the strategy and tactics from the Roman point of view, it made sense that they were going to continue. They thought, this time, third time's a charm. We're going to beat this guy. We're going to destroy his army. War's over. Life is good. Let's go celebrate. So I think when you look at it from their perspective, they were doing the right thing. That's one of the things about this battle, is when you look at the opposing sides, who could have predicted that Hannibal would not only win, but that he would annihilate this gigantic army? It's unprecedented, and that's why even today, this battle is studied as the great victory of all time that somebody was able to achieve. Sir.
Where did Hannibal go when he finished the Battle of Cannae? I mean, where did he go back to Carthage, and how did he go? By sea or back over the Alps?
He stays in Italy for 14 more years, and when he finally goes back, he goes by sea. He doesn't go back over the Alps. So he essentially stays, and again, he's trying to recruit some of the Roman cities, and some of them actually do come over to his side. But part of the problem is his forte is movement and surprise. He can't be pinned down. So it's kind of working against what he's best at. But he's in Italy until 2002, when he goes back to Carthage and loses the Battle of Zama. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you, Doc. We hope you join us next Monday at 5:30. We're going to have Dr. Jennifer Gates Foster talk about Rome again. But her topic is Beyond Hybridity, being Egyptian under Macedonian and Roman rule. And we'll learn a little bit about Cleopatra in that. Y'all have a great night.